Memoir interview best practices. In too many cases, rather than interviewing others, you may assume you can depend on your memory when you write your life stories. But memory isn't always as reliable as you want it to be. In this video lesson, you will study why to conduct an interview with people who shared the experience you are writing about, and you will learn how to do so effectively. The video is geared to interviewing older relatives, but it is just as true of interviewing a sibling, a progeny, or a co-worker. These are 3 points you have to keep in mind about memory. Memory can fail you. You simply may not be able to recall the information you need to write about another person or even about yourself with any accuracy and salient detail. Memory can mislead you. It can blur the negative role you may have played and cast another's positive role in the shadows in favor of your own role. Memory does tend to be flattering to the one doing the remembering. Conversely, it may elevate your having been bad to really bad, when you were merely thoughtless or small in your actions. So beware of being misled by memory. Memory can simply be wrong. Time has ways of altering memory. You may forget that you didn't know the facts at the time. You may confuse other people's accounts with your own experience of an event. It is also possible, because of your age or of your needs at the time, that you had a partial or biased view of what happened and why it happened. Conducting interviews and the research of the next video lesson will stimulate, supplement, and correct your memory. These activities will support and add to the facts and impressions you remember. They may also force you to evaluate what is true. Said one workshopper, quote, "A good memoir writer is a detective who mistrusts her information until she has proven it true beyond doubt. Parts of your family lore may be more fiction than fact. No matter how often told, these tales may be more tall than true." Okay, before the interview, this is what you can do. 1. Select whom you will interview. If your time is limited or your family is large and offers many choices, it will be all the more important to identify a manageable number of knowledgeable relatives and friends to interview. 2. Make clear preliminary arrangements with the people you will interview. Be specific about the meeting time, the length of the interview, the place where it will occur, and the conditions necessary for its success. Encourage the interviewee to gather memory jogs, that is, photos, clippings, mementos. If you need some help, see Chapter 2 of Turning Memories into Memoirs. Look for Section D as well as Section G of Chapter 4. These memory jogs can be used as warm-ups when you arrive for the interview. Be specific in your requests. Vague requests like, "We need a good amount of time," can be interpreted so differently that this kind of request is useless in making arrangements. Instead say, "We'll need a 2-hour block on Tuesday the 5th. Does 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. work for you?" 3. Ascertain who else is likely to want to participate in the interview, and decide whether that person ought to be persuaded or dissuaded from sitting in. An unexpected or inappropriate person can blur the focus of your interview. What you don't want there is Chatty Annie, who really knows very little about the period you are interviewing your subject about. 4. Conversely, don't dismiss other people's input too quickly. Their outlines of their experience can be valid for your family too. By listening carefully to an articulate person talk about a general experience, you may learn a lot about your own family. For instance, Your aunt may belong to another ethnic group, but being of the same sort of working class and urban environment, she may have much to say about your family's working class and urban experience. 5. Sometimes an observer at an interview can provide important coaching. For instance, "John, why don't you tell about the time your mother confronted the company store manager?" Or perhaps the other person will offer, "But wasn't that before the time you are speaking about? Weren't we still living on Maple Street then? It wasn't until a month after Edward was born in January 1947 that we moved to Elm Street." Remember, clear communication and thoughtful preparation of your goals for each interview will heighten your chances of success. How to conduct yourself at the interview. Here's what one workshopper had to say. "I wish I hadn't wasted time with my older relatives asking questions about my grandparents, questions such as, 'What were they like?' Apparently from the responses I got, my grandparents were nice, everyone liked them, they were good people. This was rather useless to me. I ought to have asked, what did they do for work? What did they do for recreation? What appliances were available in the kitchen? Who were their best friends?" Had I asked questions like this, I would know what they were really like. Okay, to avoid the wasted time of the workshop writer I just quoted, here are some guidelines. 1. Come to the interview with a list of important questions. By doing so, you are more likely not to forget to ask a crucial question, and more likely to leave with the information you need to write a great memoir. Because you have listed the information you are looking for instance, what work conditions were like in the textile mills in the early 1930s, how tenure was achieved in the 1940s at a state university, and so forth. By asking these questions, you can keep the interview on track. Toward the end of this interview, say 15 minutes before the time you or they need to leave, check your list of questions. Sometimes key questions have not yet been broached, and you ought to focus the remaining time on getting answers to those specific questions. That's when you will be very grateful for the list I have encouraged you to prepare. 2. Be specific with interviewees about what you are looking for. Say something like, "I want to know about the first years your parents were in this country. First, can you tell me the name of the town in the old country they came from?" Always be thinking of memory jogs. For instance, having a map of the country they came from on hand, or having it easily searchable on the web because you have already found it, could be useful. The person you are interviewing might say, "I don't really remember, but it was not far from the country capital. Oh yes, here it is on the map. I remember now." You see how useful this jog has been to you? 3. Take notes during the interview. There's nothing more frustrating and wasteful of everyone's time than returning home and not remembering significant details that were shared with you. At the beginning of the interview, tell interviewees you need to jot down their answers, but they should not try to interpret the importance you are attributing to various bits of information by the length of time you spend writing them. If you are not comfortable writing notes, which is my preference, consider using a recording device to preserve the information for later retrieval. 4. Be wary of asking for information that can be answered by a yes or a no. These questions are called close-ended, and they do not deepen or extend the conversation. Here is an example. Did you enjoy working on a cattle ranch? Interviewee: no. Instead of the above close-ended question, which is reasonably, but for you uselessly answered with a no, you might say, "Tell me something you liked about working on the cattle ranch, and then something you didn't like about it." The second example is an open-ended question. Tell me about, cannot be answered by a yes or a no. An open-ended statement forces the interviewee to provide additional information. Often, this additional information is very useful information. 5. Do not provide your interviewee with information or conclusions. If you were to say, "Those were meaningful years for you," you might be putting words into the interviewee's mouth. Her answers may then reflect not what she is thinking, but her wish not to contradict you. Instead ask, "Can you tell me what conclusions you have drawn from this experience?" 6. Do not rush your interview. Tolerate silences and allow time for thinking. During these silences, it is likely that your interviewee could be arriving at new definitions of his experience, or perhaps he is simply sorting his memories right on the spot. All of this takes time. People who are slow to speak could also be shy or simply unused to sharing ideas and memories. Here are 3 techniques to help you keep the interview flowing. First technique. Repeat the interviewee's last words. This can reaffirm your deep interest and help her feel comfortable. For instance, your Aunt Jeanette says, "Those were difficult times." You, nodding your head in support, respond, "Difficult times." This is the antithesis of saying, "Those must have been difficult times because wages were so low." When the interviewer, you, provides the "because" phrase, she is planting information and could really end up quoting herself. What you want to do is quote your interview subject. Second technique. Ask a question based on the interviewee's last words. For instance, your Aunt Jeanette says, "Those were difficult times." You, how were they difficult? Or you might say, "Why do you think they were difficult for you?" Third technique. Remain silent after the interviewee has spoken. Aunt Jeanette has said, "Those were difficult times." You remain silent, even for an uncomfortably long time. Aunt Jeanette, who is now wondering why you are not speaking, feels compelled to fill in the silence. "Well, those were difficult times because Uncle Hank was a union leader and he lost his job. It was around that same time that I had a miscarriage. I couldn't stand all day at the loom. I was still too weak to go back to work." This silent treatment is very effective in eliciting information beyond what an interviewee had originally thought to offer. To achieve this effect, however, you must not speak to break a silence as you would in a social situation. Risk awkwardness for revelation. Sit patiently. Don't say anything. Your silence will allow your interviewee time to synthesize, analyze, and share. Number 7. End an interview with the question, "Do you have anything you want to add to what I have asked?" Often the interviewee will share unexpected and potentially valuable information. The new material is often prefaced by a statement like, "Well, this may not be important, but..." What you get at these moments is often quite interesting, useful, and important. 8. Plan enough time to be with your subject. Elders move at a slower pace. Be aware that the fast tempo you take for granted may be exhausting and unpleasant for them. Your elderly interviewee may not have considered some of these memories for some time. It may be disturbing to her to relive the past. Allow for a cool-down period. Small talk as you put your materials away. That will ease your interviewee back into the present and give her a chance to reestablish her equilibrium. If appropriate, ask, "Are you comfortable with my leaving now? Is there anything I can get for you before I go?" A phone call later to check in and thank your elder is both kind and comforting. Here are some action steps to make your interview a success. As you prepare for the interview: 1. List the missing information you need to write your life stories. 2. Ask, who are the people who might provide you with this information? Prioritize your list according to how knowledgeable your interviewees are likely to be about the information you need and how interviewable you feel each of these persons might be. 3. Plan ahead. Set up interview times. Ask the interviewee to bring memory jogs. Anticipate problems you are likely to encounter from other people and from the location where you will be. 4. In what ways could other people contribute to the success of this interview? Think of who they are, and then invite them. Here is what you need to keep in mind to make the interview a success when you are at the interview. 1. If you intend to bring an audio recording device, use it at home first to ensure that you are comfortable handling it and that it works as you think it should. Make sure you have enough memory available on the device for a long interview. Arriving with a nearly full memory on your device is not what you need. 2. Review your list of questions. If you are not used to asking open-ended questions, practice wording each one on your list as an open-ended one. In conclusion, whatever you do today, write a bit on your memoir.